SKOL Vikings, let's win this game.
Attention Vikings fans. The last few days in Minnesota have brought news after news, and some of these developments are enough to make any fan stop and really think about what is happening. There is a major move involving a key piece of the defense, a clear sign that the front office is racing against the clock before the new league year begins. At the same time, a veteran has officially hit the market. He immediately becomes a potential factor in the most important competition on the roster. There is also growing expectation around the possible arrival of a former draft phenomenon, one of those names that can completely change the energy of an offense. And to top it all off, there is a heated situation inside the locker room with a veteran taking a direct shot at the defensive system. Let's get into it, because the first story already shows just how fast this team is working behind the scenes. This week made one thing very clear about the Vikings. The front office is doing everything possible to get the financial situation under control before the start of the new league year. It is not an exaggeration to say the team was in one of the toughest salary cap situations in the entire National Football League. The deficit was massive, the kind of number that keeps the front office working late into the night. And when situations like that happen, large contracts usually become part of the solution. That is exactly where an important piece of the defense comes into play. A player who has become a constant presence in the secondary since arriving with the team, someone who is almost always on the field. And whether people realize it or not, he has become part of the recent identity of the defense in purple and gold. We are talking about Byron Murphy Jr. The cornerback had his contract restructured by the organization. That move opened more than $11 million in salary cap space. It may sound like a simple accounting move on paper, but inside the National Football League it can change everything. This type of adjustment gives the team breathing room. To understand the pressure Minnesota was facing, the team at one point had the largest salary cap deficit in the entire league. The gap was enormous, more than $40 million above the limit at one stage. Now the situation is beginning to improve. With adjustments involving Murphy, along with other stars on the roster, the Vikings have significantly reduced that gap. It is still not perfect, but the situation is far less alarming now. And this also shows how much confidence the team has in Murphy. He arrived in Minnesota after beginning his career with Arizona. There were ups and downs during that time, including a back injury that worried many people around the league. But since putting on purple and gold, he has found stability. In 3 seasons with the Vikings, he has produced solid numbers, more than 200 combined tackles, more than 30 passes defended, and 11 interceptions. And there is another important detail. Murphy rarely misses games. He is almost always available. In the National Football League, that reliability is incredibly valuable. During the 2024 season, he reached the Pro Bowl after recording 6 interceptions and 14 passes defended. That kind of season can completely change the perception of a player. Last season, the numbers were slightly more modest. 71 tackles, 7 passes defended, and 2 interceptions. Nothing outrageous, but still consistent production, and the team clearly wants to keep him as a major part of the defense. This contract restructure does not signal reduced confidence. In fact, it is the opposite. It is the type of adjustment teams make when they know the player will remain an important piece moving forward. But there is something that needs to be said. These moves show that the Vikings are still in the middle of a major financial reset. There is still work to be done, and more difficult decisions are likely on the way, including moves involving well-known names on the roster. So let me ask you something. What do you think about Byron Murphy Jr. in the Vikings defense? Do you trust him as the team's top cornerback? Let me know in the comments, because what comes next involves the one position that can completely change the fate of any season, and the name that just appeared on the market could shake up everything inside the offense. Quick message, make sure to subscribe to the channel. It is completely free and it helps strengthen this community. There are moments in the offseason when a single development can change the entire landscape. It is not an official trade. It is not a contract signing yet. But the simple fact that a player becomes available is enough for everyone around the league to start imagining possibilities. That is exactly what just happened. Suddenly, a veteran quarterback appeared on the market, a player with a long history in the National Football League, someone who has experienced both highs and lows but has also proven he can still lead an offense when given the right opportunity. The situation became even more interesting when reports started circulating that he views the opportunity in Minnesota with a great deal of respect. That quarterback is Geno Smith. Yes, the same Geno Smith who had that incredible career resurgence a few years ago in Seattle, a player many people had almost written off in the league, only to return and perform at a high level again. Now he is officially available. The Raiders decided to release him, a move that surprised many people around the league. After all, he had recently arrived in Las Vegas following a trade with the Seahawks. But the relationship did not work out the way the organization expected. Because of that decision, Smith entered the free agent market immediately. And whenever a quarterback with that kind of resume becomes available, multiple teams start evaluating the situation. For the Vikings, the potential fit is fascinating. Minnesota is still trying to define its direction at the most important position on the roster. There is young talent in the group. There is potential, but there is also uncertainty. And in moments like this, the idea of adding an experienced veteran begins to make sense. Smith has 12 seasons of National Football League experience. He has played for the Jets, Giants, Chargers, Seahawks, and Raiders. He has seen almost every situation possible inside a locker room, and he has also delivered some strong performances. In 2022, he led the entire league in completion percentage, nearly 70%, while throwing for more than 4,000 yards. That season placed his name firmly back on the map. It is no coincidence he was selected to the Pro Bowl in both 2022 and 2023. There is another interesting factor in this situation. From a financial perspective, he could be a very attractive option. Even after being released, Smith is still owed a large salary by the Raiders. That means a new team could potentially sign him for a much smaller contract, possibly even close to the league minimum. For a team trying to balance its salary cap situation, that matters a lot. Now imagine the scenario. An experienced quarterback arrives, competition opens during training camp. A young player is pushed to develop faster. In many cases, that type of battle raises the level of the entire offense. But there is another side to this story. A veteran with this kind of experience rarely accepts a role just sitting on the bench. Competitive quarterbacks want to play. That is where the question begins to grow among fans. If Geno Smith arrived in Minnesota, would he come to compete or to take control of the offense? Because depending on that answer, the direction of the franchise could change for years. And here is the interesting part. He is not the only quarterback being discussed around the team right now. There is another name circulating behind the scenes, and that one might be even bigger. Whenever a quarterback who was once selected at the very top of the draft suddenly becomes available, the conversation changes instantly. It does not matter if the career has had ups and downs. It does not matter if injuries or struggles appeared along the way. The simple fact that a talent like that is on the market is enough to make half the league start evaluating possibilities. That is exactly what happened this week. The news started circulating behind the scenes in the National Football League. At first it sounded like speculation, but then the expectation became stronger among reporters who closely follow the quarterback market. Minnesota quickly appeared in the middle of that discussion, and soon there were confirmations that the connection might be very real. The name gaining momentum in this story is Kyler Murray. Yes, that Kyler Murray, the #1 overall selection in the draft. A quarterback who entered the league with the reputation of being a dynamic athlete, possessing a powerful arm, incredible mobility, and the ability to create plays when everything around him breaks down. For years, he was the face of the franchise in Arizona. He had strong seasons, Pro Bowl appearances, and moments where it looked like the Cardinals had truly found their quarterback of the future. But the National Football League changes quickly. Injuries began to appear. The team lost consistency. The relationship between expectations and results started to weaken. Now Murray is officially on the market, and the moment that news became public, the Vikings immediately appeared as a possible destination. This was not simply fans imagining a scenario. It came from information circulating inside the league. A reporter who closely follows quarterback movement indicated there is real expectation that Murray could sign with Minnesota when the next phase of the offseason begins. That does not mean the deal is finished, but it does show something important. The rest of the league is looking at Minnesota as a logical landing spot. And that creates a massive debate, because Murray is not the type of quarterback who joins a team to sit on the bench. He is 28 years old and still in the prime physical stage of his career. He has the talent to lead an offense. If he does end up signing with the Vikings, an important question immediately appears. Would it be an open competition, or would it represent a clear shift in the franchise's long-term plan? Among fans in purple and gold, the debate is already intense. Some people love the idea. A mobile quarterback who can create explosive plays and turn broken situations into big gains. Others have concerns. His style requires adjustments in offensive structure, changes in reading defenses, and shifts in offensive philosophy. There is also the challenge of adaptation. Arriving in a new locker room, learning the system, and building chemistry with receivers all take time. But here is another detail that makes the situation even more intriguing. Financially, Murray could actually become a relatively affordable addition at the beginning. A large portion of his salary would still be paid by his previous team. That opens the door for a smaller contract with Minnesota. In other words, high-level talent, potentially low initial cost, and a franchise still deciding how it wants to shape the future of its offense. That is why this conversation continues to grow. And now I want to hear your opinion. Would you bring Kyler Murray to the Vikings? Or do you believe the team should move in another direction at quarterback? Let me know in the comments. Because while the offense debates its future, another major decision behind the scenes involved the biggest offensive star on the roster. Whenever a team begins adjusting the contract of its biggest offensive star, every fan immediately pays attention. Not because it signals trouble, but because it usually means something significant is happening behind the scenes. That is exactly what happened in Minnesota. The Vikings front office needed to make a major adjustment to the team's finances. These are the kinds of strategic moves that push money into future seasons in order to solve an immediate salary cap problem. But this time the name involved is not just any player. We are talking about Justin Jefferson, the team's top receiver, one of the most explosive talents in the entire National Football League, and probably the most beloved player among fans in purple and gold in recent years. His contract has been restructured. It is not a pay cut. It is not a release. It is simply a classic National Football League restructure where part of the salary is reorganized to create immediate cap space. This is extremely common with players who have massive long-term deals. Jefferson's contract certainly fits that description. In 2024, he signed a 4-year extension worth $140 million, one of the largest contracts ever given to a wide receiver. What the Vikings did now was rearrange some of that financial structure to reduce the pressure on the salary cap for the upcoming season. This helps the team get under the league's cap limit before the new season officially begins. But there is always a consequence. Some of that money will reappear in future seasons. In other words, the financial challenge does not disappear. It simply moves further down the road. But that approach has become extremely common in the modern National Football League. Competitive teams do this all the time, restructuring the deals of star players in order to maintain roster flexibility. And it makes perfect sense when the player involved is someone like Jefferson. Since entering the league in 2020, he has redefined what consistency at the wide receiver position looks like. Year after year, he produces. Even when the offense struggles, and even when the quarterback situation is unstable. Last season, for example, he still recorded 84 receptions for more than 1,000 yards. The touchdown numbers were not high, only 2, but anyone watching the games understands that had far more to do with the quarterback situation than with Jefferson's performance. He remains the type of player who changes games. Defenses often assign 2 defenders to him, sometimes even 3 depending on the situation. That attention creates opportunities for the rest of the offense. So when the front office restructures his contract, it does not reflect doubt, it reflects confidence. The team believes Jefferson will remain the centerpiece of the offense for years to come. There is also another interesting detail here. His restructure happened at the same time as other contract adjustments across the roster. All of it is part of a race against the clock. Every team must be below the salary cap limit before the new league year begins next week. Even with these changes, there is still work left to do. Difficult decisions could still arrive. Player releases, trades, unexpected departures, and that leads directly to the next story. Because a veteran defensive player is already expected to leave the team, and before that departure becomes official, he delivered a message that raised serious questions about the defensive system. When a veteran player is on the way out of a team, the usual approach is silence. He thanks the fans, says it was an honor to wear the jersey, and moves on to the next chapter. But sometimes that is not how things unfold. Sometimes the player decides to say something that makes the atmosphere inside the organization a little more intense. That is exactly what happened with the Vikings defense. Reports had already been circulating that the team planned to move on from an experienced defensive player, someone who arrived with a strong reputation and a resume that included recent Pro Bowl recognition. Yet his time in Minnesota turned out to be much shorter than many expected. The name involved in this situation is Hargrave. The defensive tackle was signed less than 1 year ago with significant expectations. The plan was to strengthen the interior defensive line and generate constant pressure on opposing quarterbacks. On paper, it looked like a perfect fit. Hargrave had produced strong seasons in the past and was known for his ability to collapse the pocket from the interior, a highly valuable skill in today's National Football League. But within the Vikings' defensive system, things did not unfold the way many expected. He started the season showing promise. In the season opener against the Chicago Bears, for example, he recorded 7 quarterback pressures. It was the type of performance that energized the fan base immediately. But as the season continued, his impact began to decline. The final numbers tell the story. Hargrave finished the season with 31 total pressures and a pressure rate of 10.5%, both the lowest marks he has recorded since 2018. In 6 games, he did not register a single pressure on the quarterback. For a player whose primary responsibility is exactly that, it becomes difficult to justify the production. Of course, age is a factor. Hargrave recently turned 33, and the physical demands of the National Football League can be unforgiving, especially for players working in the trenches every play. But there may also be another element involved in this story. Before the departure was even official, Hargrave shared a message on social media that immediately drew attention. The post essentially suggested that if you are a defensive lineman who wants to reach the quarterback, the defensive system run by Brian Flores might not be the best environment for you. It was a very direct criticism, and that opinion did not come from nowhere. Some players have previously mentioned that the defensive scheme under Flores assigns very specific responsibilities to interior linemen. Often defensive tackles are expected to absorb blockers so that linebackers and edge rushers can create pressure. In other words, the primary goal is not always individual statistics. The system is designed to function collectively. In fact, a former Vikings captain once admitted that he initially questioned his role in the system before realizing how effectively it disrupted opposing offenses. Still, when a player who is about to leave publicly questions the scheme, it inevitably becomes a major conversation, especially during a moment when the team is restructuring the roster because of salary cap pressure. Hargrave is expected to be released officially before the start of free agency, and he may not be the only departure. Several other players could be leaving as well. Some releases are already being widely discussed around the league. In other words, significant changes are still coming, and that leads to a very important question. What kind of team are the Vikings actually trying to build for the future? Because when you combine major financial decisions, uncertainty at quarterback, and criticism inside the defense, it becomes clear that Minnesota is entering a moment of serious transition. Now take a moment and look at the full picture. The Vikings have adjusted major contracts, including an important defensive player and the biggest offensive star on the roster, all in an effort to stabilize the salary cap situation. At the same time, the quarterback market has opened new possibilities. A veteran option suddenly became available, and a former top draft phenomenon may be looking directly at Minnesota as his next destination. And in the middle of all this movement, a veteran defender is leaving while raising questions about the defensive system. All of these developments point to one conclusion: the Vikings are entering a period of major decisions. This is not simply about small roster adjustments. This is about the direction of the franchise itself. And now I want to hear your perspective. In your opinion, are the Vikings building something strong for the future, or does it still feel like the team has not fully defined its plan yet? Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings, let's go.